Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome. Today we are going to hear the story of a spiritual journey to Bali, a province of Indonesia, among other places. Our guest is Regina Acheampong, who felt a calling to this beautiful island in the Indian Ocean and made a month-long trip with stops in Thailand and Australia. Bali is mainly a tourist destination. Just do a quick Google search and you'll see images of beautiful, serene waters, mountains, beaches, and temples, and wildlife. And Regina found all of this, but so much more on her trip there. Here in the US, Regina works in business strategy and operations, solving big problems to help tech companies run and grow. But the Regina that I know and have come to love is a deeply spiritual person. In fact, she and I share a spiritual teacher in Robert Holden through his Success Intelligence Mastermind. She and I have had many deep conversations, and I feel so lucky to call her a friend. Regina, welcome to the campfire.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Scott. Our friendship, everyone asks like, well, how'd you find this guy that told you about the mastermind? I was like, well, he helped me find my first house and my second one. So it started as a business relationship. It has evolved so far past that. And I'm really grateful for your friendship. And as you mentioned, the ability to have these really deep and thought-provoking conversations. So I'm super excited to be here.
That's right. We just come on this journey and you just never know who you're going to meet and what's going to evolve in the process. But it's been so fun getting to know you over many years, actually.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
10 years? 10 years?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But yeah, so today we're going to talk about this spiritual journey that you took a couple of years ago. And I think just for the listeners, that probably the best thing to do is just jump in and have you tell us just some overview and highlights about the trip itself. And then we can kind of get into the calling part. But yeah, tell us where you went and what you did.
Awesome. So yeah, I went in November of 2018. I felt a calling that I needed to get away for a significant amount of time, and it had to be somewhere that was completely new to me. That part just came through over and over, and so I did a month-long journey in Asia. But Bali was the ultimate destination of that trip. But obviously, going that far away in the world, you've never been to that side of the planet. You want to see some other things. So I started my trip in Thailand. Spent about a week and a half there, and then spent 3 weeks in Bali, and then a little less than a week in Perth, Australia. So a lot of flying, but every moment was worth it. And I was just so energized throughout that experience. Even the first flight, I actually got to spend the day in Tokyo, Japan, and got to meet a coworker that I've only known via email, and he showed me around a bit. And I got to do some exploring before making the trek all the down to Thailand. And it was from basically boarding the plane on, I just felt that I was doing the right thing. I was following, this calling. And the 12-hour flight to Tokyo from the Bay Area felt like nothing. And I can tell you, I've done some other 12-hour flights. They have never felt like nothing, but there was just so much there. So much emotion. And from there, it was just one big adventure. My goal with the trip was I was going to let the universe be my guide. I did not come with a big plan. I knew I had 3, major destinations I was going to. I knew my lodging, and that was literally it. I didn't plan anything else. I wanted everything to unfold organically. And as a type A, overachieving, liking a lot of control in life, that was the challenge. That was, how can I, reimagine how I move through the world? And so what better opportunity to try this out, through this trip. So it was, from the beginning, it was very inspired. I started out in Bangkok, Thailand, and the whole time I was there, even though this is this massive sprawling city, it's basically the New York of Asia, I never felt lost. I always like everything just flowed the way it was supposed to. I always felt in sync with where I was supposed to be. And I could literally hear kind of the guiding voice of the universe at times, like telling me where to go, turn down this street, turn down this street. And so that's how I did my, exploration. So a great example of that is I was heading out to visit some temples, and I was on a boat because you have to travel down a river to visit some of the cooler temples. And there was a young kid there. He looked like he was in his mid-20s, and a voice said, speak to him. I think he's a solo traveler. And so it'd be good to connect. And so we started talking, and we ended up visiting some of the temples together. He was from Singapore. He was 25, and he said he just got this urge to get out of Singapore and try something new. And I explained to him I got this urge, a bit further away to try something new. And after visiting one of the major temples, we got separated because it was really busy at that time. There was a lot of people. But a little voice said, "Don't worry, you'll meet him again." And I'm like, what are the odds of that? Bangkok's very massive. There's a lot of people here. And so I think it was 2 days later, I had just gotten brunch. I was walking around a different part of the city, and I was literally walking up the steps to their Sky Metro or air train.
Sure.
And as I was walking up the steps, a voice said, "Come back down, go down this street." So I'm like, well, that's the journey wherever, it takes me. And so I walked down, turned around, went down that street. And maybe 2 minutes later, I hear, "Oh my God, Regina, it's you." And it's the kid from, from the boat and from
Yeah.
visiting the temples. And we're just like, he's literally losing his mind. He's like, what are the odds of this? Like, it's nowhere near where we met. It's very far from where I was staying, pretty far from where he was staying. And so we ended up hanging out with him and his friends and having another brunch, because who am I to turn down more food?
Of course.
And we've kept in touch ever since. But it was like so many situations happen like that where I just followed wherever it was. It didn't have to make sense, in any way. And I get connected with amazing people. But to run into the same person twice in a city as massive as Bangkok, like that can only be the universe. And that was just one of many really just synchronicity that happened over the course of the trip. From there, I traveled on to Phuket, Thailand, and spent a few days there. And I'm out and about, hanging out one evening, and then I see someone that I went to school with in college.
No way.
Again, like, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
And they were actually heading to Bali, I think maybe the day before, the same day as I was. And so, like, everyone's just like, there's no there's no explanation. And I think when you have those types of experiences, it really opens your eyes and your mind to the wonders of the universe and the possibilities of life, because there is a divine hand orchestrating things that is so far beyond our control. And so, one of my biggest mottos for this trip was surrender. There's a fantastic book, The Surrender Experiment. I think you and I have talked about this a
Yes.
bit.
Great book.
By Michael Singer. I actually have
Yep.
this calendar from him as well. I just allow myself to surrender to everything, which is can be uncomfortable. If your life has been very structured and, you've got this career and all these things, you follow these steps. And so allowing just life to unfold in that way can be scary, but it's so beautiful.
Yeah, and you're a personality here in the US. It's
Yeah.
kind of counter, but it sounds like you got off the plane and just you were led.
Yeah. And I set that and the thing is, I set that intention beforehand. Like, I actually wrote a journal entry before I, took off for that flight about what my goals were. And the biggest goal was really surrendering, and allowing it to unfold, not trying to control anything, because the major motivation for that trip, to take a step back, was in 2017, my father passed away. And I had to bury him. Like, I have the stamp in my passport on my birthday. And as you can imagine, that's just like, it opened a lot of emotional floodgates
Yeah.
and kind of re-examining so much of life. And I remember saying to myself, like, I don't want this to be what you are reminded of on your birthday every year. You have to
Yeah.
do something to change that narrative, and also to make my peace with what happened, because it really did bring up a lot of things that I suppressed over the years. You know, big life changes like death and births and things have a tendency to really just kind of break you open so that you can see what's inside, you know, is a great way, the only way I can think of to put it, because life just kind of stops in its tracks in that moment. And so I really started thinking about who I am, what's important to me, who am I becoming? And so that was an instrumental reason why I went on this journey.
It sounds like you took what was a really emotional experience and turned it around and made it into a positive that you would remember going forward. I mean, is that
Absolutely.
yeah.
That was the key. Like I was, if I could change that narrative and make it something positive, I could look at, you know, that time of the year in a different light. And I do. Because that this trip changed my life. I can 100% say that the person that got on that plane was not the same person that came back. I'm grateful that I allowed myself to do this.
Regina, this is the hero's journey. There oh my gosh, there's so many levels we've gotta circle back to. So, I wanna talk about that. I wanna talk about how it changed your life. I wanna hear about the voice that continued to guide you on the whole trip. So, I just before we do that, let's finish out the details of the trip, and then I wanna circle back and unpack some of this other stuff.
Absolutely. So yeah, after Phuket, I spent a couple of days there, and then I went to Koh Samui. And the funny thing is, the reason why I went there is because I don't know if you remember watching Meet the Parents, and he bought them like that secret, you know, honeymoon trip to Koh Samui, Thailand. I didn't know anything about this place, but I said I'm going there one day, and so I added
I
that to
love
the
it.
trip just as like kind of an ode to my
Meet the parents, said,
younger
Get
self.
over there." Okay.
Yeah, so that I added that on the trip and actually got connected with an amazing host. I stayed in an Airbnb there, and they just showed me a great time, like a really local feel. But then it was time for Bali, and it started off very comically because obviously Bali was the place that I knew the universe was calling me. So I had an amazing time in Thailand. Everything was just flowed very easily. And then I get to Bali. It's been a long travel day and it's late. But I'm starving because I haven't had a chance to eat anything, you know, with connections and everything. So finally get to my villa. And then I want to venture out to get food the first night. And this is a big contrast from Bangkok. You know, like I said, Bangkok is basically like New York of New York City. And so now I'm in rural, you know, Canggu, Bali, and it's dark and I'm walking and like it's on a dirt road and I'm like, why did the universe send me here? I can't find food. There's literally like dogs chasing me because that's what everyone knows, like who's been there, the Bali dogs. And so I'm walking in the dark. I know nothing about where I am. Google Maps isn't working because like I said, there a lot of these are like dirt roads and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to find food. And I'm like, why did the universe send me here? I should have just stayed in Thailand. Like this looks crazy, blah, blah, blah. And finally find food, get lost on the way back. It's a whole thing. So I'm like really just like universe, I don't get it. And so, but I, you know, you get up and try again. So I wake up the next day, get dressed and go out. And now it's sunny. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. And I took a moment, I just laughed. I was like, this is a great example of how your perspective in the moment basically changes the vantage point of everything that you see. And so I was looking at it from a place of darkness, like literally, you know, in that moment. And I'm just, everything is wrong. And then the light turns on and I'm like, okay, I get it now. My bad. And so I had to laugh at myself, but I was like, that's a good metaphor for perspective. You know, two people can look at the same thing. And if you're looking at it from a place of, you know, pessimism, you're going to see a completely different picture than someone who's looking at it from a place of optimism. And then from there, it's like me and Bali fell in love. And I was walking. So this is now, yeah, that day I'm walking and I think I maybe get 5 to 10 minutes max from the villa looking for breakfast and my shoe breaks. And I'm like, we're back again, you know? So,
What's
but I
going
took a
on?
moment, I said, I was like, as soon as I thought about my perspective laugh. And so I took a pause and I was just like, this is for a reason. Let me just try to figure out what I'm going to do. Because obviously it's a dirt road with, you know, the infrastructure is not as great there. So you
Sure.
don't really want to walk around barefoot. And I look over to my left, and there's this little restaurant. There's a lady sitting outside, and she's waving to me. She's like, "Do you break your shoe?" And so I said, "Yep." And so I walk over, and she has super glue of the gods, because this glue, she fixed my shoe. She was like, "It's really strong." And so she fixed my shoe, and it lasted me the rest of the trip, which is
You're
crazy.
making friends everywhere. Everybody just wants to
Yeah.
help you.
Yeah, and
That was
so
awesome.
through yeah, so I was like, I was meant to break my shoe right in front of her restaurant. So I ended up eating there, and talking to her, and she's like, "Yeah, I have some, great friends locally that would love to show you around. And you should definitely come back and check things out." And so after I left for breakfast, a couple of days I came back later, and the friends she mentioned were there, and they were just sitting back talking about life. And it was funny because they were talking, as women, they're all like in their, late 20s, some of them a little bit older, some of them my age range. And they're all talking about the same things that me and my girlfriends would talk about here. And I was like, no matter what your experience, how far am I from home?
Right.
And it's the same, we're so far apart, but we're also so very similar and the same. And so I made friends there. And one of the young ladies was like, "Well, I'll take you around the island on my scooter." And now the old me, the type A me that lives in America, in a place that's a little bit crazy, it's like, wait, should you really hop on, a motorbike with someone you've only met for about 30 minutes? And I absolutely wouldn't do it. But it was, again, I just went for the feeling. It felt right.
Yeah.
And so she took me to Uluwatu, which is like there's a holy temple there, with that sits over the cliffs, and it's absolutely stunning. And there's monkeys there that steal your stuff. I actually have videos of them
Yeah.
taking sunglasses and all these things. And we forged this amazing friendship, and she and I still communicate today. I went back to Bali a year later, and for my birthday, and they had like a big birthday party for me and gifts, and like, really, all because I broke my shoe. That's how beautiful and just massively like orchestrated the universe can be. Like, something that I could have just been like, this is the worst thing ever. I reminded myself, because of the day before, it was for a reason, and it connected
Yeah.
me with like some really amazing people.
It's true
Um,
surrender right there, right? Just
yeah, let
yeah.
it go. Just it's happened, so I can't change that. And so, what is the universe trying to show me from that? And so, I spent a couple more weeks in Bali, in different parts of the country. So I went up to Ubud. That's like the real, like, people really go there for the spiritual wellness. And I did my first, I think you and I actually talked about this, and this is what made me say yes to it. There was a place beside my villas that said, it was called Ubud Float Garden. I was like, I wonder what that is. And so it was actually a sensory deprivation float spa.
Nice.
And so I remember you and I had talked about it. You're like, I think you
We
should
did.
try something like that. And I said, well, that was the little sign from before from Scott. And so I did it. And that experience, wow. I've done float since, but nothing to that level. I got to a place where I did, I felt completely, where I didn't feel my body or anything. But then I was watching like my life play out, and I could see like the basically God or the universe, particle, like I'm floating as like basically a particle in space. Then there's like the source energy floating, and we're having this conversation, and then it shows me like my future. And I could feel that like I was in the presence of the divine, and a lot of the things that it showed me are things that later I decided that I wanted to do. And it was just a really transformative experience. I can't really explain it, but I knew I was just like, I was devoid of my body. It was just my spirit and the source spirit in this amazing conversation. And the water that they use in those spas, they actually take them from like temples. So it's blessed water. So it's not just like, everything was really, really intentional.
Yeah, it's the sensory deprivation experience. I mean, to do that in Bali, what an unbelievable life-changing experience. I see why this trip was so epic for you. So let's continue in Bali, and then I want to come back to some of this deeper stuff.
So yeah, so while I was there, I think it was the next day, my friend sends me a screenshot from Instagram of, she was like, "Did you know Russell Simmons was in Bali?" And I was like, had no idea. And then the voice said, "Well, you're going to meet him." And I was like, okay, well, we'll see how that works out, because he was in a he was in the part that I had just left. So it's like the odds of us running into each other, because it's like, I think, an hour and a half drive, are slim, but trust the voice, you know. So I went on, and so one of the last things I did in Ubud before I left was a sunrise hike on Mount Batur. So Mount Batur is a volcano, and it's a pretty strenuous hike. They pick you up from your hotel at 2 a.m. Again, this is something the old me probably would be like, you guys got it, you know, I'm gonna sleep. But again, it's, say yes. And you get, it's about an hour to drive to like the base, and then you hike all night so that at like 5 a.m. you're at the top, so that you can watch the sunrise. And it was a strenuous hike because of the altitude, and then the volcanic rock is very like soft, so there's a lot of tripping and all these things. But so there was a point where I was like, I'm tired, I don't want to do this anymore. But voice said, just keep going, it's going to be worth it. And like when I finally made it to the top and the sun came up over the mountain, it was just, again, one of those moments like, I can do, like, it showed me I could do these really amazing things that are outside of my comfort zone. I didn't grow up with people who go hiking in Asia by themselves. Like, it's just not a thing. But by saying yes to that, I met really cool people on the hike, and just had a big belief in myself. Met some monkeys that stole my bananas on the hike as well, and ate them
Pesky
and
little
took them out
guys.
of the bag.
But they
Yeah,
are
took them out of
cute.
the bag. They are. And I love animals, so it was fine. We had a whole conversation about it because I was going to give it to them anyway, but they prefer to steal.
It's what they
And
do.
it's what they do. But yeah, that was definitely a really, really cool experience. Now, I was sore I scheduled a massage. I thought ahead. I scheduled a massage for later that day, when we got back. But even after all of that and soaking in a hot tub, like, I felt it, but again, completely worth it. And then from there, like, kind of leading into kind of my last segment of Bali, I went back to the Seminyak area, and I was at a beach club. That's like during the day, I would often go to like beach clubs because they have like really great music, food options, and you can kind of
Yeah.
lounge, hang around, write, whatever. And I'm sitting there like waiting for my food to come up, and I looked to my right, and I said, I think that's Russell Simmons' daughter. But I was like, there's just no way. I was like, no. And then I looked back up in front of me, and he's literally standing right in front of me. And so I'm like, universe, okay. Like, this is getting a little strange. So then the voice said, I've put it in motion, you have to talk to him. So it was like, I didn't want to interrupt him being with his family, because I know celebrities get that all the time. So I said, if it's meant for us to talk, an opportunity will be created where I can talk to him, by itself without interrupting, his family time. And sure enough, like 5 minutes later, he gets up and walks to the beach. So the universe created the space. I have to then oblige and do what I said I was going to do. So I walk out to the beach, and he's, at the time he was doing some yoga and then meditating. So I waited for him to finish. And then I walked up to him. I was like, I don't want to bother you while you're, on vacation. But I was like, I felt that I was supposed to talk to you. And I explained to him kind of what happened. So we sat on the beach and talked for like 30 or 45 minutes about like
Wow.
life,
Wow.
meditation, just, what brought him to Bali, and in the lessons that he learned, being, Russell Simmons was very, very wealthy.
Right.
And he talked about, how that chasing a feeling. He's like, you buy a Bentley or a Maybach, and then you feel great for like a day, but then now it needs to be something else. He was like, I got tired of that constant chasing happiness. And so once he said he did a yoga class, he was like, after that I was hooked. He was like, and started getting really deep into meditation. Um, and now he's like, he's like, I mainly ride a scooter around the island, and I live a very low key life, and I'm very, very happy. And he said, this is the happiest he's been. And it's not, life is not, a lot of times we think that our happiness is going to come from all of these things that people told us to do to be happy. If you get the big career, you make all the money, you get the big house and the car, then you'll be happy. You got to find the happiness within yourself, and all those things then just become extraneous things, and they aren't what you seek when you're really on the path to peace. So it was really just crazy how these things continue to unfold to the point where it's just like, if I wasn't living it, I wouldn't believe it, because it was just everything just lined up in such a perfect way. But that's just the beauty of the universe, if you allow yourself to surrender to it and not try to force things into a box that you think it should fit.
I think that's the key is, your attitude of surrender and the intention that you set going into it,
Yeah.
being there and just having that open mindset, like these opportunities just came to you. But there definitely is some serious synchronicity here. I mean, I think we got to talk about
Yeah.
this voice that keeps talking to you. I mean, so let me ask you, like, was this voice something that was just part of this trip, or is this voice something that's part of you all the time?
Since the trip, it's part of me all the time, because I think I put myself in a position where I allow myself to listen. Most of my life beforehand, like, I was very type A, very anxious, very like need everything to look and be and feel, perfect. So when you're trying to control every aspect of your life, you're not even in a position where you're open to listening, and being still enough. I think that's the biggest thing, is being still enough to hear it, because especially in our culture in particular, American lifestyle is very manic. It's everyone's busy, everyone's doing this, that, and like very few people say, hey, how are you, how's it going? Oh, I'm just relaxed and being present with life. You're never going to get that answer. Everyone,
Mm.
I'm busy, I'm this, I'm that. And so I really allow myself to be still. I think meditation, because I'd started practicing meditation before this trip, allowed me the space to hear. And the voice is always there. We feel it, with our gut feelings, but we're often not still enough and quiet enough to actually hear that clearly what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that was really, really cool.
So does the voice continues to guide you now that you're back?
Absolutely.
Would you say that's the big change? You mentioned that this trip was just completely life-changing for you.
That was one big change. Like, really, this showed me I can 100% trust the universe. I don't have to know everything. I don't have to force everything. I can trust the voice that I'm hearing. I can trust what I'm feeling. But also, one of the biggest things I struggle with in my life was really, like, at times, crippling anxiety, to the point where I had to be hospitalized because the anxiety attacks were like, I would have such physical reactions to where my heart is beating so fast where it's like dangerous. And so through my life, and talking to doctors, it was just something you manage. It's something that you deal with. And that's what I accepted, because that's all I knew. But on the trip, one of the things I did that again unfolded, I was looking for a yoga class, for a certain day. They didn't have it at this place, but there was a pop-up for a releasing your fear, like, day retreat. And again, surrender, it popped up. I signed up and did it. And I just did things I would just never do, and talked about deep things that I haven't even talked to, about with people close to me, with essentially strangers. And one of the last things we did as part of that retreat was we wrote a letter to our fear. We thanked it for, getting us this far, and the things that, because fear does play, like, we associate fear with bad, but sometimes fear is good. Like, there are healthy fears. Like, the healthy fear is, I don't need to put my hand on the stove, because that's going to lead to, damage or problems. So there's some fear that is good, but a lot of the fear that we hold is not our own. It's fear that has been placed on us by our parents or by society, or, based on what has happened in the past. And now we're projecting that fear onto everything else. And so anxiety, was something that, like, I wanted to let go of. And so in the letter, I released that, and then we burned it, like, to basically release that energy into the universe. And on my last day in Bali, I was on the back of, a motorcycle. So instead of taxis, for the most part, they use like motorbikes,
Sure.
which again, another thing I would have never done, like hopping on the back of a stranger's motorcycle and hoping for the best. And they're not exactly like, very straightforward drivers. They're, weaving in and out of cars, but again, surrendering. And I remember I was heading back to my villa, on the back of this motorbike. He's flying, and I could feel this big energy roll up from my gut and through my body. And the voice said, "That's your anxiety. It's gone." And I knew that it was gone.
Wow.
And like, And after that, I've never had a panic attack. Like, I've had things that normally would have triggered me happen. And I had a perfect peace about it, knowing that everything was going to unfold. Because that's the test. Like, it's, when everything's great, it's easy to say, oh, my anxiety's gone. But I had some things that would normally send me into full blown attack, and I was okay. And like that's a life changer when you're not crippled by fear anymore. And it's, anxiety, I don't take it lightly. I know so many people suffer with it, and a lot of people downplay what that can feel like, but I know, like like what that can feel like. And so being able to understand that this doesn't have to be permanent. These things that doctors tell us we have to manage when it comes to our mental health, a lot of it is unhealed pain, unhealed trauma, or things that we haven't just addressed, or the way we've been conditioned to look at the world. And so it really gave me hope for not just myself, but for other people, that we don't necessarily have to live with these things or just manage them, that we can live free.
Yeah, and this is what's really just it's catching me right now is, I mean, you're somebody that has, dealt with anxiety, has dealt with the fear, but yet you felt this calling to go on this month-long trip on the other side of the world by yourself. You weren't by yourself, by the way, like you were, but
Yeah.
you made friends everywhere you went,
Yeah.
obviously, like you were guided. But I want to go, let's go back to the beginning because like what was it that called you? You said you weren't really tapping into that voice as much before you went. So what was that calling that said you're going to Bali?
There was a lot of fear at the beginning, 'cause that's when the voice started. Like, I wouldn't say I never heard the voice, but not to the extent that I hear it now. And so
Mhm.
I was starting to get signs that I need to go to Bali. And at that point, I didn't know. I knew of Bali. I've seen, some Instagram pics, but I didn't know that much about it. So I was like, okay. And I kind of put it on the back burner. Like it was very prescriptive of what I needed to do. Like, it was, you need to go away. It needs to be somewhere you've never been before. Cause at first I was like, well, I'll just go hang out in Europe for a while and decompress. But I'd been there, and that wasn't going to push me outside of my comfort zone. And it had to be a long time. It had to be somewhere new, and it had to be like really far away. And then the signs for ball, I would like open a website, like just, I was looking at best places to, take a mini break. And I'm thinking it's going to give me the places that I want to go. And then Bali would be at the top of the list. And then I would talk to people about what I was thinking about doing. And people would just randomly say, well, what about Bali? And I'm like, where's all this coming from? And it happened, like there was one week where like three different people were like, I think you need to go to Bali. And I was like, okay, universe, I hear you. But there was still part of me that was scared, because at that point, I had done some solo travel, but
Yep.
not that far. I'd never been to Asia in my life. And I'm like, I'm going to go a month that far away. I know nothing about the region in depth, and I'm just on my own. But I was scared. I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't come from, a family of people that do things like this. Like, I'm very much the anomaly. And there was a lot of fear projected on me at first too.
Did you get pushback from people around you?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's some people who are like, that's amazing. But like, of course, my mom, like, I'm a girl, I'm that far away. If something
Yeah.
happens, who's going to help me? And so at first she was really scared. And some other family members are like, are you sure? Like, do you want to go that far? And I was like, not necessarily that I want to do it, but I know that I have to. I feel called. And so, she made her peace with it. And now she knows, like, my child's going to be fine. She's been everywhere and like it always works out. And she understands my journey so much more now. But there was a lot of fear, that I had, but also that was projected on me. And I understand that, because, you hear these stories of, single women traveling, and
Right.
they don't always make it home. So I
Right.
had to overcome that to do this. But I'm so, so glad.
What pushed you past the fear?
My boss was a big help, because he just kept asking, "Have you booked it?" And then I was just like, "If the universe is calling me to do this, what do I really have to fear?" And having that relationship of trust with the universe, I think,
Yep.
is important, but it takes time, because the ego wants to tell you other things. Like, everything can go. What if everything goes wrong? What if you get hurt? What if this? So like, the way I even pack my bag, I've got like this big first aid kit, all these things. Now I go, it's like a small bag. The second time I went, I had a carry on and a backpack, and I know I'm going to be fine. But it's, you have to build a relationship of trust with the universe, and that just takes time, because especially if you've been through a lot of hard things, it does become hard to trust. But those are all moments in the journey that were necessary as well. The bad, what we consider bad, everything is necessary, but it takes some time to get there. I'll say that.
Yeah, for sure. I think we could keep talking for another couple of hours about this. I'm just so intrigued by it. The changes that you experienced when you came back from this trip, like how have those changes shown up for you in your life now, and like what's sort of manifested for you because of these changes?
I mean, the first thing I'll say is I was just lighter. Like the things that used to stress me out before this trip just don't. Like in the grand scheme of things, I'm realizing how much of what we, prioritize and get worked up on doesn't matter. So that was one big change. And also my priorities in life changed. I realized like the best time of my life was when I wasn't thinking about work or climbing a ladder. I wasn't caught up in anyone else's drama. It was just me exploring the world. And so I knew like my life is not going to be this big, keep climbing the ladder just to reach these milestones that don't mean anything. I want the rest of my life to feel like a vacation, like a big exploration.
All right. So just to kind of wrap things up, what advice do you have for other people that maybe have felt a call to do some kind of an epic adventure like this, but maybe they're experiencing that resistance? What advice do you have for folks like that?
Nike said it best, just do it. Like you
Just
are
do it.
not being called somewhere for no reason. Ignoring those callings, I feel like is the biggest mistake you'll ever make. I can't imagine my life if I didn't take that trip now. Like I can't imagine it. And it only opened up the door for more amazing friendships, more amazing experiences. And now I've been to every continent except for Antarctica solo. And with every trip, I learn more about myself. I learn more about the world and just become more and more at peace with, the flow of the universe. And so without that trip, because knowing if I can survive that, that was the thing. If I could
Yeah.
survive that, I'm so far away. I know
Yeah.
nothing, and for so long, I can survive anything. I can do anything. And so please just follow the calling. If you take
Just do it.
nothing else away from this podcast, please do that.
Love it. Thank you. Okay. So, Regina, you have been a lot of places. You've done a lot of things. You've experienced a lot of growth, internal and external. They're going to make a movie about you. And when they do, who is going to be the actress that plays you?
So this is a great question. I'm glad you sent it in advance because I said I'm just gonna whatever comes to mind first. That's what I'm gonna answer. I don't want to overthink it. And Holly Berry came to mind,
Halle
not
Berry.
because
Awesome.
not because obviously she's a beautiful woman, but it's who she is as a person. Like she
Yes.
continues to push her own boundaries. And everything I've seen of her in like interviews and just the things that she's supportive of is really empowering. And she's also very laid back. Like, you see this woman, you would think this woman who's had all this success, she's an icon for beauty. You think she'd be very stuck up, but she seems like the most down to earth person. And everyone that has met her is kind of said these things. And so she recently just did a movie called Bruised on Netflix. And it was outside of her comfort zone. She was playing like an MMA fighter. Who thinks of Holly Berry, in
Yeah. I'll have
MMA?
to check that out.
And she directed it. So that was her first time directing something. It was so far out of her comfort zone. And
Yeah.
that's what I feel this journey has been pushing me out of my comfort zone. So that's who I came up with. And
Halle
so I
Berry. I
decided,
love it. So, what's your movie
yeah,
going to be called?
grow with the flow.
Ooh, I like that. Grow with the flow. Oh,
Yeah.
man. That is perfect. Well, I appreciate it, and I think that you've kind of blown me away with your story today. And I'm just so excited to be on this journey with you and to watch the growth. And so for those listening, I hope you've also been inspired as much as I have. I hope that Regina's story has encouraged you to listen to that voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. So if you have a story to tell or you need a nudge to create one, please send us an email. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Regina, thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. This was fantastic. I'm really glad you gave me the opportunity to speak with you and your listeners.